guys, welcome back to my channel, the best place to be wherever you are on your wealth journey right now. Today I want to talk about negative equity. That's negative equity on the home that you live in. And stick with me as well because I'm going to tell you a story about how I had negative equity at one point and what I did about it. But before that, I will say guys, if you're interested in more videos on personal finance, mindset and wealth creation, do subscribe to my channel just underneath this video for plenty more just like this one. So what is negative equity then? Well, negative equity is where the value of the house is less than the borrowing against the property. Now, when we borrow against our home, we usually take out a mortgage, and a mortgage is just another name for a loan that we take out specifically against a property. So for example, when we buy a property, we have the mortgage plus the deposit that we put into the property, and that together makes up 100% of the value of the property. Once we've bought the property, that deposit changes its name. It becomes equity, and when the property goes up in value, the added amount of value also gets added into the equity pot. So for example, let's say we have a house and it's valued at 250,000, that's our purchase price, and let's say we're putting in a deposit of 10%, that's £25,000 deposit. Our mortgage makes up the remaining 90% loan to value, so our mortgage is £225,000. Let's say the property goes up in value to £260,000. Our equity in the property is our original £25,000 deposit plus the £10,000 additional value that the property has accumulated. This means that if we sold the house today and we paid off the £225,000 mortgage, we would be left with £35,000 in our pocket. Obviously, give or take any taxes that we might need to pay. Now, in a perfect world, that's what happens. You buy a property and you sell it when it goes up in value. But sometimes that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it goes down before it goes up. And negative equity happens when the value of the property is equal to or less than the mortgage or the borrowing that we take out. So let's go back to our example. Let's say that we've got £225,000 mortgage on the property. But something happens in the property market and our property was valued at £250,000 when we bought it, but now it's not worth £250,000, it's only worth £220,000. Now we have negative equity to the tune of £5,000 because if we sold the property today, we'd have to repay that £225,000 mortgage, but we'd also have to pay the extra £5,000 off as well. So we'd need to find that from somewhere. And effectively here we've made a loss, which is something we don't want to do. So what do we do if we've got this negative equity situation? Well, we could just sit and wait for the property value to increase. And it's exactly what I did, and it's what I would recommend people do. If you've got time on your hands and you haven't got the burning urge to move or do anything different with your property, then you should just sit and wait for the property value to bounce back, and it will eventually. The last thing you want to do here is to sell your property at a loss. Now, there are a couple of things here as well, because if you've got your property on a repayment mortgage, and I talked about repayment versus interest only in this video just up here, but if you've got a mortgage on a repayment basis, then obviously you're going to be repaying part of the capital as you're going along. So probably your negative equity situation isn't going to be that for very long because you will have overpaid the mortgage. But if you were in a hurry to sell and you did sell the property, then obviously you would still have to take that £5,000 hit in this example. If you're on an interest only mortgage, it's probably going to be more of a challenge for you because you're not regularly repaying the capital. So you have two options really if you're on interest only. First of all, you could make a voluntary overpayment towards the mortgage. Now, this is not ideal on multiple levels because if you sell it, you're still making a loss. You also might have early repayment charges on your existing mortgage, which you want to watch out for. And also you've got to find that money from somewhere, and you might not have it just lying around in your bank account. So you do need to be a bit careful. The other alternative, of course, is that you just, like before, wait for the property to go back up in value. Now, a common question I get is, well, can I move house if I've got negative equity? And the answer to that is yes, you can move house if you've got negative equity, but as I said before, you've still got to find the money to make that payment to get the mortgage to where it needs to be. So if you're buying a new house to move into, that means having enough deposit for both buying the property and to repay down the existing mortgage. Another thing you could do if you're really desperate to move while you've got the negative equity situation going on is that you could rent the property out. Now, there are all sorts of different implications when it comes to running your property as a buy-to-let, not least of which is the extra 3% stamp duty that you might have to pay on another property if you bought one whilst retaining the old one, which I mentioned in this video just up here, but also the fact that you need to know what you're doing when you're going down the buy-to-let road. So I always recommend doing things professionally and strategically. Get yourselves educated, and as you know, I freelance for a property education company, and I'll put a link in the description just underneath this video if you're interested in finding out more about that. Now, I want to give you an example of a house I owned with negative equity. Now, what I'm about to tell you may seem a little bit extreme, but you have to remember that this was before the 2008 financial crash, and some of you might resonate with the things that I'm saying because it might be that you're going through something very similar because of COVID-19 or because of Brexit or possibly because of both. And I'm here to say don't worry, because although it might seem like taking a big step back now, actually later on you'll be taking a massive leap forward, providing you can play that waiting game. So this is a house I bought in 2005. It's a mid-terrace 2-bedroom house in the town of Tadley in Hampshire, if anybody knows that area. It's just on the outskirts of Reading, and I bought this property for £150,000. Now, some of you may remember that before the 2008 financial crash there was a bit of a property boom going on. Everybody was getting involved in property, everybody was investing, everybody was moving, the house market was just amazing at the time, and people thought there'd be no end to it. You know, house prices were doubling really quickly, it was just a completely bonkers time. And my husband and I actually moved into this property. We bought it for ourselves to live in, but I'd also clocked that it'd make a very nice buy-to-let a little bit later down the line when it was time to do that. But for now, our plan was to live in it, and we had an 85% loan-to-value mortgage, so our mortgage was £127,500. The value of the property, as I said, was £150,000, and just 2 years later, 2007, the property had gone from £150,000 to £170,000. And we'd originally been on a 2-year fixed mortgage, but at this point we decided let's take some equity out. I wanted to expand the portfolio anyway, so I wanted to do something a little bit different. So we got a new mortgage, a new main residence mortgage with Northern Rock. Now, if you haven't heard of Northern Rock before, they were one of the front runners when it came to the 2008 financial crash. They were one of the biggest mortgage lenders in Britain at the time. They did lots of people's residential mortgages and buy-to-lets as well. They were a massive, massive lender, and they would pretty much lend money to virtually anyone. The forms were very easy to fill in. They did a lot of self-cert mortgages, which is where you could just tick yes, I can afford the mortgage, and they would give you your mortgage. One of their big mortgage products that they were selling in the run-up to 2008 was called a Together mortgage, and nobody else in the UK marketplace was offering a mortgage product like it. It was called a Together mortgage because it was actually 2 products rolled into one. The first product was a 95% loan-to-value mortgage on your main residence, and the second product that went with it was a separate unsecured loan of up to 30% of your property value, but it was capped at £30,000. So effectively, if you had a smaller property, you could borrow 125% of your property value. People went absolutely mad for this product. There were dollar signs appearing in people's eyes. They were just like, this is amazing, we're going to borrow loads of money. Now, because we're talking about negative equity here, can anybody see a glaring problem with this model? Of course, anybody taking out this mortgage was effectively borrowing more than the value of their own home, which is negative equity in a nutshell. But of course, because of the property boom at the time, people didn't really see it like that. They thought to themselves, okay, well, our property is just going to double again in the next 5 years. There's no problem with me taking out extra borrowing because equity and the property price will just eat that up later on. Many of us were looking at things through rose-tinted glasses and thinking, right, well, nothing's going to change. This is just going to be fantastic and it's going to go on forever. With hindsight, that was a massive mistake to make. So my husband and I borrowed 95% of £170,000, which is £161,500, plus we got the unsecured part of the Together mortgage of £28,000. That was an unsecured separate loan that isn't technically attached to the mortgage, even though it's kind of packaged as a whole. Now, I was very sensible with my loan because I actually took that loan and bought another property with it, which was an income generator, and that property managed to generate enough income to pay for its own mortgage plus this £28,000 debt that I now had. So that was kind of okay, it was self-contained, but we were still paying the residential mortgage with our wages. And of course, not a lot of people were thinking like me at the time. You know, people didn't just take the money and then go and invest it in something else. A lot of people took that money and then spent it on holidays or sparkly shoes and handbags, you know, liabilities, which really was not a good thing to do. So then, of course, we had the 2008 financial crash. and the whole of the property market just completely collapsed, and our house went from being valued at 170,000 in 2007 to being worth only 150,000 again, which is what we bought it for. So we're now down by £11,500. Not only that, but I was also desperately unhappy at work at the time, and I decided that I wanted to move back to my hometown of Banbury. We had no real option. We didn't want to sell the property and make a loss, so we decided that we would play the waiting game. So what we did was we rented the Tadley property out. Remember, I said that I'd already clocked that it would make a good rental property, so that's exactly what we did. We moved back to Banbury and rented a place here, and we rented the Tadley house out, and that gave us enough money to cover both the mortgage that we were paying and also a little bit of cash flow left over as well. So that was kind of a win-win. So we held on to that property and we kept our fingers and our toes crossed that the property market would rebound and that it would go back up to at least 170,000 again. And luckily for us, it did. The property market rebounded. By 2010, the property was worth £175,000. Now at this point, we were still on a residential mortgage with the Tadley property, and I wanted it to be part of the portfolio properly. I wanted it to be on a buy-to-let mortgage and to be doing everything properly and professionally. So I didn't really want to carry on having a residential mortgage on that property. So we actually remortgaged it as a buy-to-let. And even then we had to put a little bit of money back into the property just to bring that mortgage down, because we mortgaged at £175,000. We got an 85% loan to value mortgage, which meant that our mortgage was £148,750. And although we had to pay a little bit of money into the mortgage, we were actually really happy because the property was now on a buy-to-let, it was still giving us a good rental income, and we didn't have the negative equity situation anymore. The other bonus was that it then carried on going up in value as well, and we actually ended up selling the Tadley property 3 years ago in 2017 so that we could move into our forever home. We actually sold it for £230,000 in the end, so that gave us a profit of just under £80,000 after all the costs and disbursements and expenses and everything else had been paid, which was the perfect amount to allow us to move into our 5-bed. So the moral of the story is that yes, it definitely is a waiting game with negative equity, whether you like it or not. Either that, or sadly you have to take the hit with the loss that you make. I will say though that today negative equity is less of a problem for many of us because the amount that lenders will lend is much less, and you need a much bigger deposit, giving you a bigger buffer against the highs and lows of the property market and keeping you much safer than you would have been before. So I hope this has been interesting and helpful, guys. Do give me a thumbs up underneath this video if you enjoyed the story, and pop me a comment underneath as well. Have you ever experienced negative equity? If you did, what did you do about it? How did you handle it? I'd be really interested to know. Do have a watch of these 2 videos as well, guys, next of all, because they will help you with your wealth journey. Subscribe if you haven't done that yet already, and in the meantime, guys, do stay safe. Thanks ever so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next video.